whether, oh yeah, Jim Jones was one of the interesting ones too. Chiron on his sun, and by progression exactly on the sun for the last few years of his life. I should put his chart on the board, I'm talking about it so much. But he had Chiron in his 4th house, his sun was just on his 5th cusp, and he had Ceres in his 9th house. Now if we take it as a 4th house mother, which I'm sure it was in this case, we've said twice, his mother is connected to his faith. We have Chiron in the 4th, if we take that as like a Jupiter. We also have Jupiter in Cancer in his chart, which is going to say it again, mother connected to faith, and the Ceres in the 9th house, the house of faith. And when he was a child, his mother told him that she had had a vision before he was born that he was going to be a world messiah. He was going to be a great spiritual leader of the world. He was fed that as a child growing up, that Chiron on the sun there, that he was to be the great religious teacher. And they still don't know how he died, because they don't think it was suicide. He was shot. Did not take poison, he was shot. But the last words on the tape recording, with the tape running at the end, and the last words on the tape recording were his voice saying, "Mother, Mother, I tried, I tried."
Yeah, and that was misinterpreted by the press, too, and that makes sense in the chart. Golly, because they were thinking like he was swearing, or saying mother, mother, as a swear consult. Of course not.
No, he was crying out to his mother.
Yeah.
Because he had been her God, and she had fed that to him, that he was to be a savior.
Where did that information come from that his mother had told him that as a child?
One of the books that I read. I read 2 autobiographies of his life. I have also talked to a woman who was part of the group who left it 2 years before the end, and she has confirmed everything the books have said. It is absolutely true. The sexual perversions and the cruelty, the brutality. They claim that he was God, and she said she personally did believe that he was Jesus Christ come back to earth, until finally she was disillusioned.
How can somebody believe that when somebody's doing such harmful things to other people?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how can you believe that?
She said it's really hard to explain to anybody who wasn't there, the incredible charismatic magnetism of the man.
He probably could have
How
been
he
a religious teacher.
overwhelmed people. He was a religious teacher, and he really went astray when he tried to become God himself, and lost his faith in God and tried to be God himself. Is when he went down. But she said nobody can believe it, that, because it didn't happen all at once. It crept up gradually. It just kept getting worse and worse, the brutality, the cruelty, the perversions. And she did get out 2 years before the end. And before that, even, she wanted to get out. And when she first said something to him about leaving the group, he pulled out a gun and pointed at her and said, "If you leave, I will kill you personally." So she had to wait till she could leave secretly. Yeah.
Excuse me, I was reading not too long ago about the Love family in Seattle. Is that something similar to this Jones building up?
I don't think so. I don't know any of the details about that, but it takes a very special, unusual kind of person to have that kind of magnetic power over people. And usually it is involved in the charts that I have with the heavy focus on the 7th and the 8th. Hitler is an example. Billy Graham is another. Bobby Kennedy is another. Good and bad, positive and negative. It depends on how they use it. That tremendous charismatic power over other people. Charles Manson was another, right? Heavy 7th, 8th. Mussolini in his day. Heavy 7th and 8th house, where the people really have that power of other people. Usually Mars or Sun or both over there. My power is over there. And there are 3 negative ways we can deal with that. One is to really give it away and be a doormat. Say, I need you to take care of me because I can't, I have to give in. I only like myself if you like me, I have to please you. Second is the Hitler route. I'll control you and then I'll be safe if I'm in total control. And the third is retreat and avoid. If I don't get close, I won't get hurt. I can't deal with anybody. I just have to build walls and hide. Those are the 3 negative ways, but the tremendous power over people is one possibility out of that. And when I first heard about the Jones thing, I said, he's another Hitler. I got his chart. It was the Taurus Sun, square Mars and Leo in the 8th house. And he Jupiter, Pluto, and Cancer in the 7th. So we had that, and Neptune in the 8th also, and Pallas was there too. So he did start out with this spiritual urge to help people, and it just went astray when he lost his faith in God and tried to be God himself. And of course, his last years he was heavily ill, seriously ill and heavily on drugs. So he really was crazy, paranoid and drugged.
Could we take a break and then look at his chart?
Sure. Take a short break and we'll put his chart on. Since we talked about it so much.
Yeah, that's
His Jim Jones thing. I just did James Warren Jones, which is his full christened name. I suppose I could do the Jim Jones too. But it's pretty impressive if you're into numerology at all. You will never see, at least I have never seen a name so dominated by ones and fives. Now the general association of numerology with 1 and 5 is a very great amount of personal will, self-will. I will do what I want to do and I don't need anybody else, I can do it. And 5 does carry the connotation of sensuality and sexual excesses if it gets out of hand, if it's not handled. And so I have never seen a more appropriate name for anybody to do what he did. The birth path is 545, so the total is a 5. The vowel totals, if you sum up all the vowel totals, they sum up to a 5. All the consonants sum up to a 5. The total of the name is a 1. He has 6 5s individual letters. He has 6 1s individual letters. Even the Jim comes out with a total 5 to make the Jim Jones a 5, as well as the James Warren Jones. It's a pretty incredible combination of 5 and 1. I have never seen anything like that in my life. And I think that when you can get an outstanding, unusual case, that's really your test of the theory, of the formulas. So his name really supports the whole numerological picture that far. Now, what I have not been able to fit is the numerological technique of getting numbers for each year of the life. They did not give any kind of satisfactory picture of the debacle at the end of his life, and the fact that there would be that big crisis, destructive crisis in his life at that time. I did not feel the numbers were adequate for that.
This was taking
in
each
terms of
letter?
the current numbers, taking each name and running them concurrently, and you finish one name and start it over all the way through. So for his first year of life, he would have a 1 for the James, he would have a 5 for the W, and he would have a 1 for the Jones. And then his second year of life, he would already go on to the A for James and the O for Jones, but he would continue with the 5 up to the age of 5 for the W. So each number goes the number of years that the number represents. So Warren would take a long time to go through, and the other two names would go through rather quickly. Although James goes through the fastest probably, because there's 3 1s in that. But Warren would last until he's 5 for W, 1 more for A, 6, then 2 9s, add that the 6 to the 18, that's up to age 24, and 2 5s gets him up to 34. So Warren would take him clear to 34, and then it would start over again. So that's the system. But it fell down, I think.
Have
I
you
felt it was not
tried
adequate.
using one name rather than using all 3 concurrently for each year, just taking like James and going through like that? You follow?
Yeah, but then you'd have only one number to work with. This way you get 3 numbers for each year, and you get a total number. So you have actually often 4 numbers. Well, you have always 4 numbers. They may be some of the same, to give you a characterization for the year. And every time that you shift to a new letter so that a number changes, of course, that's supposed to be a change in the life that year, something different in the life. And there was a changed number in the year of his death at Jonestown, but the numbers were not the negative numbers. They were supposed to be the harmony numbers. I think I've got that numerology thing here. Yeah, the numbers of the big year were 1, 9, 5, with a total of 6. Now 6 is the total, which is supposed to be the primary character of the year, is humanitarian service. Love and affection and family and humanitarian service. 6 is not an appropriate year for Jonestown. Not an appropriate number. So I feel that the system failed. But the name itself in the birth path, are really right on.
Do you use the system where you add one more than the actual year adds up to?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Let me see, I'm just trying to think how 1931 would be let's say 1931 is a 5-year, but it's really a 6-year because it comes to 5, but you're into the 6th year. That's the Caballerian.
Nope, never heard of that one. Just use
And
whatever number you come up with.
Well, if you think from 0 to 1, from the first year of life is your first.
Oh, well, I apply the numbers
Yeah.
to that year, yeah. So the first letter of each of the names applies to age 0 to 1, and then you start the next one, age 1 to 2. That I did, yes. Anyway, let's skip that. I just put that out because I thought you might be interested to see how numerology came through on the name and the birth path. But in the chart itself, as you can see, first of all, we would say that he has a father figure as a role model, but it could easily be a negative role model with the Saturn, Capricorn, Vesta combination in the first house. And of course, they're very closely conjunct the east point, which I do take as another ascendant. It's like an auxiliary ascendant. It's your equatorial ascendant. And of course, you're not born at the equator, but the equator is a universal circle, a great circle that goes through the center of the earth. And it does seem to give another valid sensitive point in the chart. So there we have this tremendous, probably very intense situation connected to a father figure. And of course, in his case, it was a very negative relationship. His father was a weak man, an invalid from a war injury, was never able to work effectively. They were on relief, and his wife had to try to support the family. And he despised his father. His father was, I think, probably brutal. And to make up for his own inadequacy, he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan and had to put somebody down to build himself up. And of course, Jim Jones went to the opposite, the negative identification with the father. He associated with Negroes all his life and cultivated them. Most of the members of the church were black. His main thing in life was to bring equality among blacks and whites. You know, a direct opposite effort to do exactly the opposite of what his father did as a member of the Ku Klux Klan, which endeavored to put the blacks down. So it's a beautiful example of the negative identification with the parent and doing the opposite. And in the end, of course, he did incredibly more destruction to the blacks than his father ever did with his white sheet and burning crosses on the lawn. And we can also see that there's a very strong thing with the mother, with that 4th house. The sun is just on the cusp of the 5th, which is a tremendously powerful magnetic position for it. And conjunct Chiron, I see that as similar to conjunct Jupiter. And there's an emotional tie there, an identification also with the mother, because that is Aries in the 4th, which is part of your identity picture. Mars, Aries, and anything in or ruling the 1st house. And Uranus ruling the 1st is there as part of the identity too in the 3rd house. But this was a case which you will sometimes find with Aries in the 3rd. You see two sides, two possibilities. One is that there is a brother or sister who is part of the role model, where you see yourself reflected back from this other person. The other is, Aries in the 3rd is a loner quality, a person who doesn't have any siblings. You find that sometimes with just Aries, sometimes with Pisces, Aries mixture. Here we have the Pisces cusp and the Aries in the 3rd, and in this case he was an only child. And never learned to adjust his own will to the will of others. He was born fighting, and he stayed fighting all his life, one way or another. And the contact of the mother, the importance of the mother's relationship also was the moon right on its own node, within 1 degree. That's often a very important quality, intensity connected to the relationship to the mother. Venus there, not far from the 4th house cusp, can be affection too, and Ceres is another key to mothers up there in the 9th house in Libra. So we can see the potential of the affection for the mother. Venus rules the 4th house. Ceres is in a Venus sign. Venus is conjunct the 4th cusp. And the identification with her, in this case a positive identification, and an idealization as another side of this, as well as her belief about him shaping his belief about himself and his spiritual destiny. Because if you just look at the chart, it's not that religious a chart. There really is not anything in that chart at first glance that would show someone who would have this thing about being a religious leader. But we do have the Chiron on the sun, which is a clue to my destiny is to be a religious leader. My ego is to be a great religious leader. And at the same time, the south node of the ninth is saying that this is a lesson. To me, the south node is where we have to learn something, and once we've learned it, then we have something to give. We may do it voluntarily, and we may get it yanked out of us like pulling teeth, but it's where we do have to learn something. And the south node up there is learning something about religious values, beliefs, ideals, morals. And in Libra, it's also trying to learn how to be an equal. That is, to allow other people to be themselves, to accept them as they are, and have teamwork. And that he never learned. Neither the religious faith, he lost what little faith he ever had when he really tried to play God himself, and he never learned to be an equal. He always had to be in control. And again, we can see why. With Mars in the 8th, the paranoid potential, unless I'm in control, somebody else will be. And the only way I'm safe is if I'm in control. So that's one of the negative alternatives. And the placement of Jupiter and Pluto over there further adds to the power theme, the search for an ideal in his relationships with others, with Jupiter there, with Neptune in the 8th. And of course, one positive side of that is to play savior and help people. And he did try to do that. His whole life was supposedly devoted to helping other people. But when it came right down to the crunch, with his own lack of faith, insecurity, need for total power in his own hands, and that did include his stashing away a mint of money, 8th house emphasis there, which he extorted out of other people, sometimes by devious and dishonest means. And so he really was into all of the negative potential of the chart. He really did them all. And yet at the same time, that Pluto, Jupiter, and Cancer, and the Leo and the Neptune can also be an absolutely devoted spouse, and apparently his wife was incredible. The girl I talked to, who was part of the group for several years, said she was the most beautiful person she ever met. She really was a saint, and she stayed with him right to the death and died there with him. And so I don't know what was with her. I don't have any idea of her birthday, but how he could have held someone who really was a spiritual, idealistic, and devoted and loyal person like that, stayed right to the end, caring for people and loved by everybody. That may have been part of what held the group together, of course. When he became so terrible, when he really was going off on drugs and brutality, it may have been partly just that everybody cared so about his wife. It may have helped. But she stayed to the end. And the power theme you get with the mixtures of fixed and cardinal. This is very typical of someone where you get the cardinal and fixed crosses mixed in the chart. You get the power struggle with the world. And again, this can be positive if we can do it in sports. You can get sports champions doing it. You can get it in game playing of all kinds. You can get it in competitive business, in professions like law, where litigation is a major part of it. You can get it in military service, in judo champions. There are lots of ways that we can do this constructively, in fighting for causes. And of course, he was a fighter for what he believed in. The only problem was he did it with his own personal power needs finally taking over and overruling everything else. But the power struggle theme really hits you with a cardinal cross and the fixed Sun-Mars square as well. The importance of the marriage, again said not only by the strong 7th and 8th, and 4th for that matter, and Libra in the 9th, but Juno right on the 4th cusp. He married when he was only 18 years old. For a man, that's rather unusual. His wife was slightly older than he was, married right out of high school, never got a university degree, but he did take a few courses of college and dropped out. He never really had any training. He just started preaching and managed to get himself ordained in a variety of churches, and had a very interesting career. And apparently the time when he really went over the board into, I think, really insanity was with his progressed Mars crossing Neptune. And that was when he started doing his fake healings. Because he apparently did have healing power. He really did have tremendous charismatic power over people. And he was really working with healing, and he started losing his power, and he started faking it, and having people pretend to be ill and pretend to be cured, or even pretend to be raised from the dead, claimed to have done that repeatedly. And he would do this, put on shows across the country, big billboards announcing he was coming, and advertisements, come and see this spectacular healing. And then he would have this performance put on to make people think. And he was mostly dealing with blacks and ignorance. People were basically uneducated and ignorant. And note that the Neptune and the Mercury are exactly trine, and they were both stationary direct the day he was born. That also is very striking. That puts them into high focus. Any planet that is stationary, changing direction, is an extra high emphasis, and they're in a very close trine to the ascendant. So that too is part of the charismatic power. Mercury, Neptune, ascendant, and a very close trine. Any questions now?
Where does this birth time come from?
Came from Indiana, where he was born. The Astrological Association there dug it out.
I just wondered because I saw so many times at the time it happened.
Yeah. There were a lot of speculative times. I did a speculative chart on him about 35 minutes earlier than this time. I figured this time had to be right to put Pluto over in the 8th house and Sun in the 5th. But I figured with the spiritual thing right from, this religious thing he had right in the beginning, that he ought to have Sagittarius rising. So I did a chart with late Sagittarius rising. That fit everything else that I felt was, shown in the character and in the events. And but this one came from the astrology group in his area. Any other questions before we go on? Okay, the association